Hi, Stephanie. Welcome to the Empowered Nutrition Podcast. I can't wait to chat with you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm great. My day was a little crazy, but I was looking forward to this all day. This is my highlight for me, not just being a little creepy fan right now, but I can't wait to ask you some questions about what you do.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be on your podcast today.
Thanks. So maybe let me start with this. When we go to school to be a dietitian, it's a science field, it's a clinical field, it's very technical. So tell me, but obviously you have all those skills and you know all how to do all that, but I'm curious how you got into the work you do, because you heavily focus on how we can communicate better with our patients to help them along the side of more behavior change. It's like the problem is, like, we know what, maybe we have an instruction on what we technically should do, but doing it is another thing. So tell me how you got into like that side of nutrition work.
Oh, yes. So I got into it actually probably in the first couple of years of working as a dietitian. So, like all of us, we went through our training, got our degrees, and then we're just really excited to work with clients and impart our wisdom and our knowledge. But I noticed very early on that I would be having these fantastic conversations with clients, like really great initial assessments, but then they would find the change process a lot harder than I was expecting them to find it. It
Mhm.
was really difficult for them to make the changes that we had agreed upon, that they said, yes, that's possible. They would be coming back from, like, for their reviews, and they would be saying, look, it's just been really hard. I haven't had enough time to do X, Y, and Z. And I really didn't know where to go from there, as we are very much trained to give information and
Right.
educate, but not so well trained to coach and counsel people through the behavior change. And thankfully, I had a couple of amazing mentors at the time, where one of them said to me, oh, Stephanie, this is part of running a nutrition practice. There are going to be people that are ready to change and people that aren't. There's not much you can do about it. And then I had another mentor who had some advanced counselling skills training, and
Mm.
really got me to think a little bit deeply about how I was feeling, what I felt was missing, and how I would, if I ideally could show up for my nutrition clients the way I would like to, what would that involve?
Mhm.
And that was probably the catalyst for me deciding to go and advance my counselling skills and go back to university and get my master's in counselling, because I really felt like I can help people with the what of behavior change and the why, but I wasn't sure how to help people with the how. And that's what people struggle the most with. So, fast forward, me getting into the degree, I was speaking to my manager, and I asked them, can you please put me in an area where I will be talking to people and I will be able to really help them with behavior change, like in our organization, which clients struggle the most with change. And so, Erin, that's how I ended up in the renal nutrition specialty, because
Oh.
they're like, we're really struggling with our with the renal service. The no-show rate of all of our clinics are 50%. And there was like thousands of clients that needed to be seen. And half of them wouldn't show up when they had an appointment. And they're like, what do you
Wow.
think about taking that on? And I said, challenge accepted, because up until that point, I was learning everything from my counseling degree, and I was slowly putting together a new framework that I was trialing with all my clients. And I was getting very good, like, results and feedback from it too. And so, fast forward a year from there, that no-show rate went from 50% to 5%. Like, it was such a
Oh my God.
significant, yes, it was such a significant improvement. And these were not clients that just, overnight decided I'm ready for change. These were the same population with very similar problems, having a very difficult time not accepting their illness, adjusting to their illness, because there's so much to think about, and really buying into the idea that perhaps I can make eating behavior changes and they could work with me, and it doesn't have to be so overwhelming. And from there, my practice just grew and grew, and I've been a renal dietitian or a kidney dietitian for over 10 years now. And of course, that caught the eye of a lot of managers around me, and I got invited to create a counselling skills framework and teach it to all the dietitians in that organization, Erin, which was that there was about 50 of us at the time. And
Wow.
so we got to, I asked if we could do it under research conditions, so it could all be evaluated, it could get peer reviewed, we could actually see what difference having these skills are making on dietitians. And it was very, very positive. The results were significantly,
Wow.
like their skills had significantly improved. And they were the dietitians that kept saying to me, Stephanie, run this again. Stephanie, make this online. Don't just limit
Yeah.
it to our organization. And so now I teach this as a business to dietitians worldwide, and heavily involved in research and trying to finish off my PhD. So we've got more data and more evidence around how dietitians can do better for their clients.
So awesome. I mean, I so relate to this in my own practice. I mean, I guess maybe one misconception is like you would think that just practicing nutrition outpatient would sort of like cause this to improve on its own, but I haven't really found that to be the case. I've been doing this now for 10 years as well, and I still just don't really, I still get a lot of patients where like they just don't seem to be getting anywhere, and I'm not really sure what to do about it. And I really see that because I own a group and I have a team of dietitians, and I see that in them as well. It's like if it's almost like it, thankfully for, because of you, I realize it can be learned. But if you didn't know any better, you almost would think it's some like innate thing, like either they have it or they don't. Like,
Yes,
because there's a stark
absolutely.
difference between people that kind of have it and they don't in terms of how well they retain their patients. And thus, I think really help them to get the benefit and the help that they're looking for.
Yes, absolutely. And I've had the same experience as well, nurturing dietitians on their counseling and coaching skills. That experience alone is not enough to teach you
No.
something new, because experience is helping you get better at what you're already doing,
Yep.
and and perhaps the complexity of what you're already doing. But counseling and coaching people who are struggling to change is a completely different skill set to education or information giving. And so the only way I've ever seen dietitians improve their coaching and counseling skills to a point where they have client retention rates of over 90%, very positive reviews from clients. Clients are very satisfied and getting really great results is when they are deliberate with what they're trialing and what they're trying to gain experience with. And we just don't get taught that in
No.
our training, but it's very essential that you train yourself in it once you are a dietitian, because that's where you can learn and practice, and your learning curve is actually much more exponential, because you're not worried about being tested the way that you are or passing exams.
Yeah.
You're actually just wanting to make a difference in your practice. So I'm a big advocate for postgraduate counseling training
Mhm.
for dietitians.
It's so next level that you actually went to go get a master's in that. But I wonder if, and I'm thankful that no longer is that like the only route. I wonder if it's just that you didn't really have another way at the time.
Yeah, you're right. There was no other way at the time. I had done all the short courses that I could have exhausted in Australia at the time. And I really didn't want to become a psychologist. Like, I wanted to stay as a dietitian, but with advanced skills. And that led me to the master's in counseling. But at the same time, I'm still a dietitian, so I'm not practicing as a counselor. So
Yeah.
there were definitely things that improved my knowledge and my understanding, but I wouldn't be counseling on that in my practice. So you've got to be very
Mhm.
aware of your scope. And so
Sure.
I think that's where my framework was born from. Like, what can I take from this degree
Mhm.
that would be applicable to the way we work as dietitians, and that would help our clients get better outcomes for themselves. And so I do get asked the question, like, would I have gone to do the masters if a program like what I have is available now? And like, it's a question mark, because these are the skills that I really wanted to obtain and the skills that I use all the time. And so, yeah, I'm glad that it's available now for other dietitians. So the going back to study is not the only way to gain these skills.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe tell me a little bit of the secret sauce, like with nuts and bolts. Like, don't tell me all your secrets, but like when someone, like even someone who's maybe not working with a dietitian, like they maybe just got a new medical diagnosis, or they have an upcoming like life event or whatever it is, they feel inspired to work on their health and like modify their nutrition. It's so hard for people to implement change. So what are some strategies that you would say that you help people with for like changing their eating behaviors?
So the first one is to really help your clients identify what's in it for them. What is the real drive and
Mm,
motivation behind wanting to change your eating behaviors? And so, if you've just got a new diagnosis right now, sometimes there can be fear associated with that, a lot of confusion, lots of overwhelm. You might be projecting into the future, like that worry and anxiety, because you're not sure how this is going to pan out yet, because it's all
mhm.
very new. And I
Yeah.
think working with a dietitian as early as you can is going to be quite helpful. So if you can get access to a dietitian, that would be amazing. And some of the background work that you can do is really thinking about how you would like your future to look differently with this diagnosis. Or if you already
Mm,
have a diagnosis and you're very symptomatic with whatever you have, or not symptomatic, but it could become symptomatic in the future, really thinking about, if I was to fast forward to 2 or 3 or 5 years from now, how would I like things to be different? Because that's what you want to be thinking about. You want to be thinking about the future that you're working towards, and
mhm,
that have faith that things can actually get better and be managed, because the start is always going to be quite overwhelming and difficult. So I really talk about building the future vision that you want for yourself first, and trying to go as deep as you can. So asking yourself a few questions, such as, where would I want to see myself in a year or two from now? Why would this be important to me to achieve? And how would this impact my life and my relationships and the things that
mm.
I really want to be doing?
So good.
Because it's got to hit deep in order for you to um, commit to the process with longevity. What we see a lot in the literature, but I see it a lot with my nutrition clients as well, is that when you feel like something's been enforced on you, you're not really sure how it's going to benefit your life. You can't see a future vision. It requires too much self-control to either make or maintain the changes. But when
Mm,
there is a very big reason from inside of you as to why you want things to be better, that's always going to be the step in the right direction. It doesn't mean change isn't going to be hard, but it is going to make it feel like you are pulled towards it because you
mhm.
want it, just trying to push away an unwanted outcome.
Yeah.
So that would definitely be step number one. And step number two would be to really expect that change can be difficult. You're not doing it wrong. It's just eating
Yeah.
behavior change is hard. It's hard for almost everyone. The ones that I would see, the clients I would see that seem like it's a little bit less of a struggle, they've got the history of the struggle, and they're kind of on the tail end when they've come to see you.
Yeah.
And so just knowing you're not alone in that struggle, it doesn't mean that you're failing, but it does mean though that you have to go through the struggle to get towards the other side. It's not that easy. Eating is very emotional. And
Yeah.
even if we don't realize it, like, we have a different relationship with food and our bodies, and that affects our relationship with change as well. So just when you expect the struggle, it's not going to surprise you or shock you so much where you might want to give up as quickly. And then the third thing that I would really advise is don't do too much at once, Erin. So
Mm,
too many things is the enemy of change. You just get so easily overwhelmed. And I understand why people want the results, tomorrow,
yeah.
because you just want to feel better. But it is a process. It does take time. And one thing at a time actually gets you further along than trying to do lots of different things, but it doesn't fit in with your capacity for change and then you stop.
Mhm.
And so really believing that slow and steady actually gets you a little bit further along.
So interesting, because the 3 things you said are so good, and it's like, number 1, really be connected to where you wanna be and why and how it affects your life, but that's different than the way like, our culture motivates people. It'll motivate them with more shallow things, like pictures of
Mm-hmm.
looking good in a bathing suit or something like that. And then number
Yeah.
2 of, not doing too much, what is it? Is, what's number 2?
Expecting the
Oh,
struggle.
yeah,
Yeah.
opposite of what the society tells you. They tell you it's gonna be easy. And then number 3 of not doing too much, they tell you to do everything at once. So it's like, no wonder people are frustrated because it's
Yep.
like they're doing they feel like they're getting nutrition guidance all the time, but it's actually all of it's like the opposite of what you said.
Yes, absolutely. And I think there is a lot of shame and guilt based marketing that happens around health, which is very difficult for people will process it and might feel some of those emotions. And it is so difficult to actually change from a place of shame and guilt.
Yeah,
People tend to change from a place of understanding themselves better and being more connected to who they want to be rather than what society or everyone else is telling them they need to be, and finding that balance inside them. And you are right, like things are marketed as, do this and everything's going to get better in 28 days or 30 days or 45 days, and it doesn't
yeah,
even work like that. But that is what's marketed out there because none of this is regulated, unfortunately. And
yeah,
so when you actually try to make changes, you're like, why aren't I better in a month? Like,
right.
what's going on? And it can be very, very discouraging and very disappointing. So I think if you can take just one thing away from today's podcast is expect it to take a while. And that does not mean that you are not on the right track.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. I love how you bring up like the shame side of it, and I guess related to that, another thing I've heard you talk about is just kind of this phenomenon that I definitely see a lot, where it's like they almost it's not like they've never tried to diet. They've tried so many diets, and it's like they've kind of run out of the ability to go all in on anything because it's failed every time. And so it's almost like
Mhm.
they've lost faith that they can. So they'll come and see a dietitian and say they want an outcome, but then um it's kind of what I said, where it's like you can kind of tell that they've lost faith in their ability um to be successful, and it almost prevents them from even like really even really going all in on anything. So tell me a little bit about that of like, do you think that's a phenomenon that like that happens, and like what's the way you would say like people can work through that?
Yes, it's definitely something that happens a lot, and that's actually part of the counseling framework that I teach as well. Spending time with your clients, finding out as much as you can about their past experiences, because
Mm,
past experiences are going to leave a lot of clues as to what your clients might be. What appeals to them to do, what outcomes they're searching for,
mm,
and it actually also talks to the effort that people are putting in to trying to find a like positive outcomes for their health, but they just haven't gotten there yet. So when I see my nutrition clients, I do hear a lot of them saying, I've tried so many things, and they're almost saying it to me as if I might not believe them, but I do believe them
yeah,
because
of course.
just because you've tried but you haven't gotten the result that you've wanted, like that's effortful. And so the first thing that I talk a lot about with clients and anyone listening, like, you are putting a lot of effort in. It just has not paid off the way that you wanted it to yet. And so the effort is there. It might be the approach that needs to be refined, and the speed of change, and also your tolerance to change. And so let's say if you've tried to change your eating behaviors 5 times and it just didn't work out for you, you ended up like going back to not being able to sustain it and going back to the way things used to be. Every time you start a new journey, you are starting with a little bit less confidence.
Yeah.
And confidence is actually a very important aspect of making change and maintaining the change to get your outcome. So one thing to expect is that your confidence may be a bit lower, because confidence is always based on your prior experience. So if you don't have experience of the change being easy, being able to maintain the changes, getting the health outcomes you want, and keeping them long term, then it's not going to feel like it is so possible straight away, because it's based on your prior experiences. So when you're going into any new relationship with a dietitian, or you're trying to change your eating behaviors by yourself, whichever way you're doing it, know that any lack of or any lower confidence that you have is expected, and it's common. And the only way that you can push through that is from making some changes that are not so overwhelming, seeing that you can do it. And that's where the slow and steady actually really helps you build your confidence, because you just keep adding and adding and adding to it. But a lot of the time, motivation will get blamed. I'm just not that motivated. But what I see a lot in practice is that your motivation could be really high, but if your confidence is lower, then that's also going to make the change feel a little bit harder. And so instead of trying to beating yourself up about the fact that you don't feel so motivated, like working on your confidence, like your belief in your ability that you can make this happen. And of course, there are going to be things around you that are going to make change justifiably harder. And hopefully your practitioner will take that into account and work with your capacity for change. So let's say you live a very busy lifestyle, you've got caring responsibilities, you feel like your stress is a lot higher these days. Maybe taking on 5 things is actually going to exacerbate all of that. But taking on 1 or 2 things is going to allow it to be doable. And then you build on that, and really believing that that's the way forward. You don't need to be doing more to be better. You just need to be doing what is within your capacity and moving forward.
So good. I almost think that, it's like you try to build in some, like, what are some true wins that you can get, and start to get some wins under your belt. And in order to do that, don't pay attention to what the world is telling you to do. It's, ideally, like you said, work with a practitioner. Even if you're by yourself, it's like, what's a really small change you can make? And it probably won't feel life-changing in terms of your health overnight, but you're building your confidence back that you can implement something and stick with it.
Absolutely. And nutrition is one of those areas of health where you don't always see the change or the result that you're hoping for straight away, but it is happening. And then you might see it in 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. But usually in my experience, if people can get through the first 90 days of trying to make changes without evaluating whether this is working or not, like, just let the outcomes go for 90 days so you can learn what you need to do, build the right systems around you, the right the eating habits that are going to help you meet your goals. I always see that things tend to change around that 90th day mark or that 3-month mark, because if you're trying to improve gut related symptoms, if you're trying to improve, blood test results, those things tend to need time. The changes need time to work in your body before they manifest in you being able to physically see the change or seeing it on a blood test. And so if you can give yourself the time without wishing it was going, like, you can still wish that you wish it happened tomorrow, but if you can wait that period out, most people tend to see positive results going into the
Mhm.
direction that they want to.
Okay, and since you're kind of doing one small thing at a time, I'm sure it depends on the person, but I'm assuming that over that 90 days, there's more than one small change. It's like you're slowly adding these small changes on, maybe like one a month or one every 2 weeks or something like that.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So I would generally recommend that you try and do no more than 1 to 3 things at a time. If
Mhm.
you have the capacity to do so, that's okay. Go for it. You can do a little bit more. But then if the days or the weeks do get busier or more stressful than expected, have your top 1 to 2 priorities out
Mhm.
of those group of things that you're doing that you can fall back on, so
Mhm.
it doesn't become, I'm either doing everything or I'm doing nothing. You want it to be, I'm either doing it all or I'm still doing something, because that something is going to propel me forward. And that's a very
Yeah.
big shift in people's thinking, because all or nothing thinking tendencies are very common. They
Yeah.
stem usually from our childhoods. They're ingrained in us. You're
Mhm.
not just going to be like, I'm going to stop thinking this way and acting this way tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's a process. And so by working with hopefully a dietitian that can help you prioritize what to start with, finds out what your capacity is, and works towards that, you'll just
Mhm.
build on that over the first 90 days.
Sounds so simple what you're saying, but when I think about sitting across from someone with all or nothing thinking and they want a full like food makeover, it's kind of scary to think about
Mhm.
giving them one small thing because you feel worried that they're going to be frustrated with that.
Absolutely. That is a fear that almost every dietitian I work with will
Yeah.
say to me. And I think that the most important part of this working is you communicating with your clients as to what is your capacity for change
Mhm.
between now and our next session,
Mhm.
because you can absolutely show them how you're going to help them over the time that you're working together. And you want to see that from your practitioner. You want to know, how are they going to help you get from where you are now to where you want to be over the time that you're going to work together. But
Mhm.
it is unrealistic to think that you can make all the changes at once. It's
Yeah.
not it's not as common. Maybe for some people it's going to, they will be able to do that. But the way that I would practice that concept is telling people how I'm going to help them, what types of changes I think should be prioritized in their life to help them get the results that they're really looking for. And then I will check with them, what is your capacity for change? How many things can you take on between now and the next session? And the answer that I always get, Erin, without a doubt, is it depends what you're going to say, what you're going to tell me to do,
Sure.
Stephanie. I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, well, I'll give them a list of things and
Mhm.
then they choose. So
Yeah.
what you're doing there is that you're not just saying, I'm only going to leave you with one thing, but someone's got capacity to do 3 things or 4 things. You ask them about their capacity. And let's say someone says to you, oh, I can do 5 or 6 things over the next 2 weeks. Sure, give them the recommendations that they are yearning for, but always have a backup plan. If
Yeah.
things get unexpectedly stressful and time gets taken
You'll
away
pare
from
it
you,
down. Mhm.
yeah, pare it down.
Like
And so
this is
that
the
way,
item that's passing score, one thing, and then the rest of this is extra credit. You're welcome to do the extra credit, but if you don't, it's okay. You still pass.
yeah, absolutely. And I think you just brought up a really good point, that sometimes people think they need to be making changes to come back to see their dietitian. And I've
Yeah.
had so many
Oh,
people
so
say to
much.
me, yeah, I
I
almost didn't
almost
show up
canceled because
today.
I didn't do it. It's
Yeah,
like, that's why you should come, actually.
for
Yeah.
sure. And so I tell that's one thing that I would recommend you say to your nutrition clients. No matter what happens over the next 2 weeks, you never have to qualify for an appointment with me. Please come back, because when you're struggling, it's actually one of the most important times for us to have a conversation around that. And that's a retention strategy in itself. It builds a very
Mm,
strong relationship with your clients, because people want to know they're not going to feel judged if they're struggling. That's very
yeah.
important.
That's so good because I don't think I do explicitly say that because to me, it's just like, of course, if you're struggling, that's the most important time to meet. But I think actually that's not obvious. And
No,
in fact,
it's
they
not.
feel, yeah, the opposite, that they might be judged, like you said, or it could be embarrassing, or they might be disappointed, or, if you just openly say that, then that I'm sure is very comforting to them. Yeah. So good.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, tell me about this. I've heard you talking about increasing tolerance for the change process. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll admit, I don't know much about that. Maybe you can tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, sure. So one of the concepts I talk about is helping people increase their window of tolerance to change, because
Mm,
our tolerance is not always like our window is not always very wide. Everyone's going to have quite a different relationship with change. They're going to have a different relationship with themselves in terms of like how they feel in terms of the speed of progression. And not everyone is comfortable with struggling, and a lot of when these emotions come up for you, it can be very difficult to process them. So then
mm,
you kind of might shut it down and not want to do it anymore. And so one thing that I talk a lot about with my nutrition clients, and I recommend it to every dietitian, is start conversations around what the process of change is expected to look like for your clients. Like,
mm,
what is normal? What is expected? What is common? Like, what do your most successful clients do differently? So you can share what I like to term insider knowledge. And this was from one of my published studies back in 2018, where I was interviewing nutrition clients around their experience with eating behavior change and their experiences with working with dietitians. And one of them said to me, it'd be really good if you could just like tell us, how hard it's going to be at the beginning, but that we're going to get there. And I was like, that is such a good point.
mm,
We know it's going to be hard. We don't expect it to be easy for you. But if you're expecting it to be easy and then you struggle, the first thing that's going to come up for you is disappointment. It's the fear of
yeah.
failure. Oh, no, this is not working. Another thing that's not working. And so the idea of giving up becomes so attractive because you are genuinely worried that this is not going to get you to where you want to be. And so when you can openly tell clients what they can expect from the process, and that
Mm,
all your clients, like even your most successful clients, go through the struggle. But what is often the difference between people that keep going and that don't keep going is what meaning they've assigned to the struggle. Is the
mm,
meaning this is part of it and I need to just keep working on it? I need to talk this out with my dietitian. I'm going to get through this. Or is it, this is a sign something's not working, I must stop? And so when you give people that insider knowledge that even my most successful clients, they struggle, but they come back. They come back and they're trying their best to move through the emotions, the uncomfortable emotions of things not changing, and continually making the effort when they're not seeing results just yet. That
mm.
is what's going, like, it's part of helping people increase their tolerance to change, because knowing what to expect, that predictability, can reduce the overwhelm that comes from those first 90 days of doing something very different.
Wow, that's so interesting. Because again, it's another thing that from the dietitian's end, you almost think goes without saying how hard it's
Mm-hmm.
gonna be, but you're totally right. I think they don't really expect it, and then like what you said is so true. Like when it is hard, and it always is, they're in a difficult position. It's like, well, I'm disappointed now, and the
Mm.
easiest thing is to just cancel my appointment. Um, so, but if you've previously told them to expect that, it's part of the process. And I've seen people that would push through, like do get results. Like that would be such an encouragement.
Yeah, in my experience, it is a very big encouragement, and it's a very effective counselling strategy to help um, uh, people not like to be able to manage the overwhelm that comes with the struggles, and also to get them comfortable to keep coming back to you as
Mhm.
well, because it's part of the process. And hopefully when your clients come back to you, you do have the coaching and counseling skills to talk through it in a way that's going to be very helpful for them so they can understand the situation better and also move forward from it.
Yeah, so good. It's fascinating. I mean, again, it's just so countercultural, all of it. But it reminds me of like a question I got one time from an interviewer. They said, how do you even get any patients coming to your clinic? They can just go online and get as much free nutrition information as they want. Why would they ever come to you? It's like, well, it's not that that's a competition thing for a dietitian. I think it's almost like that's part of why they come, is they're seeing all that information, they're trying things, they're not getting anywhere, they're frustrated, and what's missing is that's all just information, but everything you're talking about is different. It's about mindset and expectations and the process, and that's really where it's at.
Yes, and that's a very interesting question that you got from
Yeah, it was
while you were
direct.
being interviewed. It's correct, but do you know what the other thing too is that that is such a big misconception that that's actually the traditional health model that is built on. So the problem is a knowledge deficit. The solution is giving the knowledge, and then the
Information.
outcome is that the behavior is changed. But that's not behavior change is so much more emotional than that. And I would also argue that having too much information is also very confusing and overwhelming. And when it's not regulated, you don't know what to believe. And where the value comes from getting support with your eating behavior change journey is that you want to find out which out of all this information is contextual to me, like
Yeah.
what matters to me. That's number one, because not all of it is going to be applicable. Not all of it is even going to be helpful. Some of it's going to be harmful. And so you need that trained eye to work out, with what you've got going on right now, whether it's a diagnosis or general, health promoting activities that you might want to take part of. It really has to match the person's individual circumstances and their histories. The other thing is that change really requires support and accountability and scaffolding. Like, what do you do first? What's the biggest priority?
Yeah.
How do you help people with the change process, the mindset, but with the strategies that are also going to give them the biggest return on investment? So I think that's a great question for us as dietitians to really think about what value we bring beyond what is already available for people. So they're very clear on the process that we take them through. Otherwise, no one would have health issues if all of the nutrition advice was, number one,
Yeah,
doable,
exactly.
easy,
That's what it says.
and
It
relevant.
actually
Yeah.
helps us. It gets everybody overwhelmed and wanting to
Yeah.
just get something to help them because, Instagram reels aren't getting them anywhere. And what you said is so good. It's like a dietitian. The thing that we can do is, like, I got a picture of like almost like a grid in my mind when you were talking of like, okay, there's the things that are hard to do and the things that are easier to do, and then there's the things that are going to change your health faster and the things that are going to change your health slower or not at all. And we can kind of in our mind look at somebody's medical history and hear their story, and we can know what's in that top right quadrant of that grid of like relatively easy to do, relatively powerful, and then like do everything that you've been sharing with us around like layering in the even more important thing of, that telling them that one thing is like 5 minutes of the appointment. The rest of the appointment really is just everything else you described of like helping them with their mindset, laying out the roadmap and supporting them with their expectations is also valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially if we think about the clients that you see, Erin, too, like they've got complex medical
Yeah.
conditions as well. And so some of that nutrition information is going to be, might be really helpful for people that are looking for general healthier eating advice. But when you have medical conditions that you're really trying to either manage, treat, reverse,
Right.
This is where you need that deeper understanding of putting a roadmap together that is going to meet the person's personal needs, medical
Yeah.
needs, and everything else that is going on for them. And I'm about to publish a study after I've interviewed another lot of clients who have been trying to change their eating behaviors. And the number one thing that they really struggle with is when things are not customized for them.
Yeah.
And it makes change so much harder. And that customization really comes from having a relation, like a professional therapeutic relationship with someone who is an expert in the area that you're trying to improve in. So if it's
Yeah.
eating behavior change, you go to your dietitian. If it's something else, you go to another health professional. But that customization actually keeps people going and makes them
Yeah.
think it's going to work for them.
That's so good, because if they go online and they get a generic plan, it's going to probably be highly complex and very restrictive, especially for chronic illness. Like, I got this full autoimmune diet, or I got this full therapeutic diet that's very complicated and has all these phases and it's very overwhelming, but it's still not individualized for them. Whereas if they meet with someone and work through like that, again, that grid I'm picturing of like, what's that initial, like you said, you ask them like, here's a how many things do you think you can implement, give them a few options from that top right quadrant, and they've selected it. It's like that's as custom as it gets, and they'll probably get more mileage out of that than if they fully implemented if they tried to do the whole like super complicated restrictive diet, because they just have a hard time long term sticking to it, especially since it might not even be the right thing for them. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that having access to all that information has its advantages.
Yeah.
We can just get so much access now compared to ever before, but just also being mindful that it may not be what, like it might not be suitable for them either. So
Mhm.
still coupling that with the advice from their dietitian. And so when clients come to me and they're like, oh, I've googled this, and I've read this about kidney disease, I'm really confused, there's so much to do, I'm always saying, I'm so glad you've done, like, thank you for sharing that with me. It sounds like you're putting in a lot of effort to try and find the right answer. Talk to me about what have you read, what are you trying to achieve, what's confusing you, what do you need more certainty about? Because I know that sometimes other practitioners are like, oh no, why did you go and Google all of this? You've just gotten yourself
Oh,
confused. Where I'm like,
right.
no, like, this is someone who's seriously trying to find an answer to their issue,
Yeah.
and I'm going to help you find that answer, but I want to know what you already know, where we're starting from, and where I might also, as your dietitian, need to help you reduce your overwhelm or your confusion, because I do not want you leaving a session feeling overwhelmed or confused, because that is the recipe for not changing.
Hmm.
You need to leave the session with certainty, very, very clear recommendations that you feel you know how you're going to be able to action them when you go home. So you've got that plan as well. Because whenever there's any ambiguity, Erin, it makes and people get confused and it becomes harder to make decisions in the moment. They often will revert to not making the decision.
Absolutely. Yeah. What you said was so validating, because I think they always fear that, they're between a rock and a hard place, as they want to address their pressing health concern. The thing that they have access to is the internet, so they try to solve it. But I think there is a fear that they're going to be kind of shamed for that, or that they're going to be dismissed, or told that what they're doing is foolish. And so I love that, of like how you just honor that and tell them how good it is that they're inspired, and just try to like roll with that momentum is amazing.
Yep. Yeah, I think you're right. They do find it more validating. Probably earlier in my career, before I had these skills, perhaps I would have tried to correct what was wrong with the information that they've read a little bit too
Right.
soon. But now I go through obviously my thinking is different, my understanding is different. I'm 14 years in now, so I'm a little bit wiser than what I was when I first started. And so
Yeah.
you see things differently. So definitely rolling with it. And then once you someone feels like you're really respecting what they've done up until that point and genuinely respecting it, like this has to come from a genuine place, this is where they become so much more open to hearing what you've got to say, because they're feeling comfortable.
Yeah. So good. I feel like I could ask you questions all day, but I know you need to get back to your important things you do. So maybe, do you mind just letting people know where can they learn more about you, and what are some of the things that they can, maybe for someone who's a general public, or if someone's actually a dietitian, what are some resources that they might look for from you?
So I have my podcast, which is the Nutrition Counselling podcast, and that's on Apple and Spotify. It is more of a professional podcast that is targeted towards dietitians and nutrition professionals. But if you are just curious to find out like all the mindset and counseling strategies that might help you along your journey, feel free to listen on. And then you can also find me on Instagram. My handle is at Dietitian Counselling Skills, and counselling has a double L. It's not spelt wrong. It's just that I'm from Australia, so everything has a double L instead of one L. Yeah. And they're the main places that you can find me. And for any dietitians or nutrition professionals listening on, I do have a free Facebook group where I do regular continuing education trainings in there, and I run programs and things. So I can send you the link, Erin, if you'd like to share it, and anyone who's listening that's a dietitian or nutrition professional may join.
Absolutely. We'll put everything in the show notes, and your podcast is amazing, by the way. It's so good.
Oh, thanks so much for the feedback.
I mean it. And
I appreciate it.
I'm planning on sending some people in my group to your course as well. So to be continued.
Oh, thank you. Yep, I'd love that. We can talk about that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Stephanie. We'll put everything in the show notes, and appreciate your time so much to come on the podcast today.
Thank you. Likewise. So happy to be here.
Take care.
Thanks.